Chapter 7, Immigrants and Urbanization. Take a look at your study guide, and the question number 1 is asking between 1870 and 1920 about blank Europeans immigrated to the United States. So in this section, we're going to be looking at what we call the new immigrants. Where did the immigrants come from? Between 1870 and 1920, about 20 million Europeans immigrated to the United States, many from Eastern and Southern Europe. So for number 1, go ahead and write down 20 million people. If you take a look, this is the map of where these people came from. This is up in the north of Europe, and then more so down the east side of Europe versus England and France. Number 2 is asking you, immigrants came here because of what? You're going to find this on this slide. Why did immigrants come here? First of all, they came here to escape religious persecution, improve their economic situation, experience greater freedom in the United States, and you can go ahead and write down those 3 bullet points for letters A, B, and C. Keep in mind, if you remember, why did the original people come here during the colonial times? The same exact reason. Please keep in mind, if I go too fast, all you have to do is hit the pause button. So it wasn't only Eastern Europe that the immigrants had come from, because if you take a look at this slide, a smaller number of immigrants came from Asia. As you know, we already discussed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Number 3 is asking you how many people came from Asia and what did they help build. You should already be able to answer the fact that they helped build what? You should be saying to yourself, the railroad, specifically the Transcontinental Railroad. Also for question number 3, it's asking how many Asians came. You can say about 200,000 Chinese came. Question number 4, in 1898, what did the U.S. annex and what group of people came to the United States? Annex is a fancy term meaning to take over. On this slide here, what we did, the United States annexed or took over Hawaii. And this is when it became part of our territory. And as a result, what people came over, you can go ahead and write the Japanese. So for question number 4, you're going to write down the U.S. annexed Hawaii and the Japanese arrived in America. These are not the only groups coming into America. Here on this slide we have people coming from Jamaica, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and other areas because there were no jobs there. So they came from the Caribbean and they went into Florida that you can see right here. Question number 5 is asking how many Mexican immigrants came here by 1910. By 1910, we had about 1 million Mexicans arrive by 1910. This is a graph just showing where the people came. As you look here at 1860 to 1880, most people were from North and Western Europe, and these were known as the old immigrants. But if you see in 1880, you start seeing other folks are coming. You see Southern and Eastern Europe has a big spike. Asian people are coming at this time. Big change in America. Where all these folks arrived are 2 places. Number 6 is asking to describe Ellis Island and Angel Island. These are the 2 islands they're talking about. So, most European immigrants came to the United States and they arrived in New York. So, Ellis Island is in New York. They had to pass through an immigration station located on Ellis Island, and this is supposed to be New York here, New York Harbor. When they did come here, they had to pass an inspection. Officials at Ellis Island decided whether the immigrants could enter the country. If they had serious health problems or a contagious disease, They were simply sent back. So if you look at this picture, you had people waiting in line just to be inspected. Same thing here. So they're inspection stations. You can write that down next to number 6 as well. What you're going to write down for Angel Island is it was on the west coast, located in San Francisco. This was the immigration station for the Asian immigrants coming on the west coast. It was a very similar to Ellis Island, an inspection station, but a lot of people found it more difficult to get in through Angel Island versus Ellis Island. When the immigrants arrived, question number 7 is asking, where did many immigrants settle? Many immigrants settled in communities with each other from the same country. You might want to ask yourself, why did they settle in the same neighborhoods with other people? Common language, common culture. They actually knew each other and they were able to communicate effectively. So what happens in America is what we call a melting pot. This is a fact that many races and cultures blend together, and then they come to America and become Americans. What other group of people did we try to quote-unquote Americanize? You should probably be saying to yourself, the Native Americans. Remember the video that I showed you when they were cutting the Native Americans' hair to make them more quote-unquote American. So we were trying to do the same thing to the immigrants that arrived, but many of them tried to hold on to their culture and refused to adopt the American culture. Number 9 is asking, what were some American reactions to the new immigrants? And then define nativism. On this slide, you're going to see many Americans didn't like the immigrants living in the U.S. You can write that down. Nativism is defined as the obvious preference for native-born Americans. And write that down as well, please. Nativism gave rise to anti-immigration groups and also led to demand for immigration restrictions. So when you have a whole lot of people who are demanding change, who has to step in? You should be saying to yourself, the government. So remember the video you watched about 2 nights ago, and this is the Chinese Exclusion Act. So number 10 is asking you to describe that. Take a minute and go ahead and summarize what you see on this page. The Chinese worked for low wages, labor groups pressured politicians to restrict them, and then they banned all but a few, and it wasn't lifted until 1943. Remember in class, we also looked at a close reading document on the Chinese Exclusion Act. These are the naturalization classes where we tried to quote-unquote Americanize the Chinese. And if you look there on the right, there's just a picture of a bell from Angel Island. Number 11 is asking you to describe the causes of the Gentleman's Agreement. This is on this page right here. The Gentleman's Agreement. In San Francisco, all the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean children were placed in special Asian schools, and this led to anti-American riots in Japan. In exchange for President Roosevelt persuading San Francisco officials to stop separation policy, Japanese agreed to limit immigration to the United States. So the causes of it is the anti-American riots in Japan. So write that down for number 11, please. The next section is challenges of urbanization, because when all these immigrants came to the United States, they all had to settle down someplace, and they settled where the jobs were, which just happened to be in the cities. Number 12 is asking to define urbanization. You can simply write down urbanization is the rapid growth of cities. As I just mentioned, many immigrants settled in cities, and they settled mostly in the Northeast and Midwest cities because this is where the factories and businesses were. Number 13 is asking you, where did most immigrants settle and why? You can write down this bullet point right here, mostly in the Northeast and Midwest, to find jobs in the factories and businesses. By 1910, immigrants made up over half of the population in 18 major American cities. 14 is asking, what is the Americanization movement? This is the same thing as assimilation I had mentioned earlier regarding how we treated Native Americans. So what we did was we established ways for the immigrants to learn English. We sent them to school. They learned American history and government, and this helped them to become citizens. Go ahead and summarize this page for question number 14. Question number 15, what other groups moved to the cities and why? What was the Great Migration? On this slide, other people who moved to the cities are farmers, they lost their jobs to machines, and African Americans, farmers from the South. Why did they come here? Jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. This is what is called the Great Migration. So also next to number 15, write down the Great Migration is many people, especially African Americans, moving from the South to the North up in the cities, and we had a rapid growth of our cities. So one of the questions you may be asking yourself is, if all these people are moving to the cities, where are they going to live? These are some of the urban problems that we faced. A shortage in housing. So number 16, what was an urban problem? You can write down shortage in housing. And it's also asking you, describe the two new types of housing that was created. Go ahead and summarize number 1 and number 2 with on question number 16, please. These are some pictures of the houses. Notice the kid being bathed in the kitchen sink. Large number of families living in crowded spaces. Not only did we have problems with housing, we had problems with transit. And if you have ever visited New York City, you would know that traffic is very bad there. So what we did was just develop mass transit. And this is question number 17. They developed mass transit, which is transportation systems designed to move large number of people along fixed routes. Bus stop, train, train. So go ahead and summarize this for question number 17.